And if I could just ask everyone to please keep their computers on mute, to keep their Zoom on mute until we get through a significant part of the webinar and to Q&A. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today. I am Meg Laporte. I am co-founder of Art Against Ageism and your host for today. Art Against Ageism is a nonprofit organization that uses art and creativity to tackle ageism and advance more accurate and affirming views of aging. I am hosting the webinar today in partnership with Gray Panthers, New York City, where I serve as a board member. The art that we are examining today is the documentary No Country for Old People, which advances our respective missions by using the art of storytelling to expose how structural ageism and ableism exist in long-term care. As someone who has worked in this field for some 25 years, I believe that the original institutional model of nursing home care was based on biased and damaging attitudes and stereotypes about older people. This original sin of this unfortunate phenomenon is the creation of buildings that other its inhabitants and capitalize on economies of scale to force people to share rooms and eat, bathe, and move on a schedule that conforms to the system instead of the person. Over time, this model has become a powerful feedback loop that produces the very conditions that are present today. It's important to recognize that there are myriad models that turn this original sin on its head and produce person-directed care environments that ensure the dignity and well-being of its residents and staff. And we will learn about some of that today. It's also important to recognize the people whom I know in this field and who are passionate and incredibly committed to the respect and dignity of people, the people they serve. The story of No Country for Old People offers a look at how the system continues to fail people today. Within this context, we will focus on direct care work, which is consistently underpaid because it is culturally framed as low skill, expendable, and invisible. Assumptions rooted in ageism, ableism, as well as sexism and racism. This is not a workforce problem alone, it is a values problem. This conversation matters because we cannot meaningfully improve long-term care without changing the cultural logic underneath it. By naming ageism and ableism as root causes, not side issues, we open the door to solutions that honor direct care professionals, center human dignity, and build a system of care that truly values people at every age and ability. With that, I would like to introduce the panelists. Susie Singer-Carter is a multi-award-winning writer, director, producer, actor, and caregiver advocate whose work blends storytelling with social impact. She wrote, directed, and produced the 2018 film My Mom and the Girl, starring Valerie Harper, and drawing from her personal caregiving experience to shine a heartfelt, uplifting light on loving someone with Alzheimer's. Her feature credit includes Her feature credits, include writing and producing Bratz, the movie, and co-producing Soul Surfer. She is also the creator and host of award-winning podcasts, Love Conquers Alls, named Best Podcast by New Media Film Festival, and Best Dementia Podcast by Good Pods, as well as co-creator of the horror comedy audio series I Love Lucifer, nominated for Best Audio Fiction by the Indie Series Awards. Most recently, Susie wrote, directed, and produced the three-part docuseries No Country for Old People, a nursing home expose. It's now streaming on Prime, Tubi, and Hoopla, if you haven't seen it yet. After her mother suffered neglect in a highly rated nursing facility, Susie felt compelled to expose systemic failures in long-term care and spark reform through storytelling. The series received the Gold Anthem Award for Health Awareness in Film and Video. In response to the overwhelming audience reaction to the film, Susie has founded Roar for LTC, a nonprofit movement dedicated to respect, oversight, advocacy, and reform in long-term care. She will tell us more about Roar later on. Our next panelist, Sherry Perry, is a CNA and board chair of the National Association of Healthcare Assistants and a lifelong frontline caregiver. With more than 3 decades of experience as a CNA in nursing homes, assisted living, and home care, she brings the voice of direct care professionals into the national leadership and advocacy. Sherry is a steadfast champion for CNA education, recognition, and workforce reform, ensuring caregivers are respected as essential healthcare professionals and elders receive the quality care they deserve. Today, Sherry works as a CNA at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Tennessee. Lori Porter is our third panelist. She is a nationally recognized elder care advocate and workforce reformer with more than 40 years of experience in long-term care. She is the co-founder and CEO of the National Association of Healthcare Assistants and a former nursing assistant who has built her career on amplifying frontline voices and challenging systemic failures in elder care. Lori is an innovator of CareForce Academy, an accessible and online education and training platform for direct care professionals, and Canary Cares. Her leadership has earned inductions into the McKnight's Women of Distinction and appointments to the White House Coronavirus Task Force on Quality and Safety in Nursing Homes and the Ohio Governor's Nursing Home Task Force. And she just last year received the Aging In Trailblazer Award. She is the author of Everything I Learned in Life I Learned in Long-Term Care and host of Blowing the Whistle on Elder Care, a forthcoming podcast. Before we dive in, I would like you to just let you know that at the end of this podcast, we will have, at the end of the webinar, we will have time for Q&A. But please also put your questions in the chat as well. Or you can also wait till the end to ask on camera live, if you will. And again, I'm going to just ask people to keep their mics on mute. I would appreciate it. So we're going to start with Susie. Susie, first, I did give a tiny synopsis of the documentary, but if you could do that again, and then also talk about at what point during your mother's harrowing journey of care and that is illustrated in this film, did you decide or realize that it needed to become a documentary?
Right. Well, thank you for doing this, first of all, and huge thanks to Grey Panthers for also being a part of supporting and allowing us to speak about this. And of course, Lori Porter and Sherry Perry for being just incredible, like consistent advocates and loudly. And I really appreciate it. So, No Country for Old People is a three-part docu-series, and it started out as a film, but we as we went along, we realized there was so much to tell that we couldn't short shrift it, and so we made it into a three-parter because it's just so important to get this information out and out what our goal was to get the information that I learned as a consumer to the public who are just like me, who weren't in this community and didn't know anything about and don't know anything about it. And I wanted them to understand that this is happening and to get it out beyond our echo chamber and our echo chamber is very powerful, but we need everyone else to know as well. So that was really my impetus. I think what really clinched it for me was that you mentioned My Mom and the Girl, my short film, which I made to really express my a little bit of my journey. It was really my mom's, a day in the life of my mom's, but how I learned, to navigate Alzheimer's with someone I love so much and how to lean into it. And I thought, just what the world needs is another Alzheimer's movie. But in fact, they did. In fact, the more stories, the better. And that they relate and people do find that comfort and they learn that way. And so I was able to talk about destigmatizing. I was able to talk about how I learned to lean in and show the mistakes that I cringe when I think about what I did with my mom. So I think that I realized through that process how powerful storytelling is. So by the time my mother passed away, and I'd already met my co-producer, my illustrious co-producer, who is Rick Montcastle, former federal prosecutor, U.S. attorney, who had prosecuted nursing homes for over 2 decades and never saw any change. And he was the first person that I met who told me this was not just my problem, this was a systemic issue. And when my mom passed away in July of 2022, and I had first met Rick, and he fortunately or coincidentally, which he says there are no coincidences, he was retiring, and he said, we decided it'd be very powerful to make a documentary, and that if we did, he would throw his hat in the ring. And so, how could I turn that down? And the other thing was that I felt, because I have this skill to tell stories, and I already saw how powerful they can be, I thought if I didn't, I would be culpable. I would be, as bad as everyone else if I didn't tell the story and pass it on and let it be known. So, and I know how hard it is for so many caregivers once their journey is over in the long-term care. It's so harrowing that you don't want to think about it anymore. You just want to, close that door and go back to your life. And it it is difficult, and I understand, but I just felt very passionate that I needed this to get out to the public. So that was my reason for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susie. Can you share? You actually, I think we were talking just before we went live. I wonder if you would mind sharing that story or that message you got, and maybe some others that you've received since the film has been released.
Oh, right. Well, because I think, we live in our we don't get out in the world so much, when we're working as in production. And as you mentioned, we've launched this 501(c)(3) movement, grassroots movement, Roar. And so I don't know, how this film or this series is being received, other than I have a flow of direct messages, emails. People find my email. I don't know how, and they send it, and it's not just one or two. It's like dozens every day, and many of them, which is very apropos for this conversation and your topic, is that they come from our frontline workers, who are as much victimized as the residents under this system, right? And so because what we find is that this system has created a pathology of understaffing, and understaffing is just built into the business model, and it has been that way for decades, and that keeps their overhead low and it keeps their profit high. This is the owners I'm talking about, and our frontline workers are they are the family, they are who are taking care of our family, are suffering, and they suffer for so many things: moral injury and disrespect and dignity, and they're underpaid, and they're not given benefits, and they're just not appreciated, and they're looked at like widgets in this game of business, right? So um, I think what heartens me, not us, in addition to all the families that write me and say, thank you, this is exactly what happened to my mom. This is exactly what happened to my husband, and on and on and on and on. I get so many letters from nurses and CNAs and aides and doctors and specialists who say, you know, bravo and thank you. And yes, I've been seeing this for 30 years. And I was just telling Megan, Lori, and Sherry just last night, this was just one. And I'll just tell you the first paragraph because it was a long paragraph. But she said, I'm watching your documentary, No Country for Old People, and my heart is breaking. I'm an aide for almost 30 years and just recently stopped working the floor and switched to dietary. I worked the COVID unit, and it took a toll on me mentally. I guess I just wanted you to know that I know how you feel. And and
Thank you.
and that's emblematic of the kinds of messages I get. And I don't think there's a better validation than those kinds of validations. And so it touches me deeply, and it gives me the wind that I need to keep going, to keep advocating, because it is meaningful, it is important, and it's important to everybody.
Thank you so much, Susie. It is incredibly important. And I think with that, I'd like to go to talk to Sherry, actually. Sherry, you've been a CNA for, is it 38 years, I believe? And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your own experience during COVID, because you worked at a nursing home. during the COVID epidemic, and and then perhaps talk a little bit about why you think there is this understaffing and high turnover and recruitment issue and retention issue in nursing homes with regard to CNAs.
Yeah. So, yes, I did work in the nursing home. I had been at the nursing home I worked at for 27 years. And I did get COVID while I was there working. And it was bad. I now have long COVID. So I have lasting results from it. Um, and the sad thing is that while I was out sick, in and out of the hospital, the only calls I got for my job was, when are you coming back? And then finally, the final call was, you can come back, or we're putting you on leave, and you won't have you may not have a job when you come back. And so, my response is, do what you need to do. Um, so, and it was hard to work COVID. It was hard to see the people. They went into depression. Their worlds were turned upside down. A lot of them couldn't understand why their families couldn't come anymore. They just knew that their routine was broke. And they wasn't seeing people. And probably in their mind, they thought, oh my gosh, they don't care about me anymore. They don't love me anymore. And so it was really hard to see people and the rapid decline that we seen while COVID was running so rampant for us. And
Thanks.
yeah, as far as the other question, there's so many reasons why we have these problems, and I'm going to address the first big elephant in the room first, because that's what everybody tends to want to say, that this is the reason, and it's livable wages. So we know that CNAs do not make a livable wage, and that is not fair, because the work we do is so important, and it plays a toll on us mentally, physically, and emotionally. And everybody deserves to make a livable wage. That's why we all go to work. So I hear all the time, oh, well, it's got to be more than about money. Well, it is, or we wouldn't stay in it. And like for me, I worked multiple jobs, multiple years, to be able to do what I loved and what I felt like I made the most difference in. So yes, it wasn't just about money, but it took away from my family time and my self-care time, and everything that most people who work now is a requirement. They figure that's a requirement for their job now, to be able to receive all that stuff. We don't get that, because we have to work multiple jobs to be able to pay our bills and take care of our families. So it is an issue, and it's one that needs to be addressed. But there's so many more than that too. It's deeper rooted than just wages. It's the lack of respect and recognition that we get for the part that we play in taking care of these people. And as a healthcare team, we're overlooked. Like, we're not even considered part of the healthcare team. And the things that we see and tell the nurses and the doctors, and the things we find wrong with the patients, they wouldn't know it if it hadn't been for us telling them, because we spend the most time with those patients, and we see them at their most vulnerable moments. And we build this bond with them that it's almost like an unbreakable bond. And sometimes we know stuff that their own families don't even know about them. And that's how much trust they have in us, that they finally, after years, they can tell their story to us, because they've held it in, and we're the ones that they opened up to about it. And also, there's the decreased professional requirements. So CNAs now, the requirements used to be so much more, and their curriculum was a wider based. They got to learn more, and now they don't. They've dwindled it down to 2 weeks maybe. And what can you really learn in 2 weeks? What can you really learn about taking care of another human being with so many issues, health issues, if you don't know what you're looking for, and you don't know how to you don't know how to communicate with the professionals, because we're not taught that. We're not taught the lingo anymore, how to communicate, and sometimes we don't understand what they're talking about or what they're asking us, because they're using those big fancy words. and we're not taught those. So also just preparing the new CNAs to get out on the floor and to see what actually goes on. They don't really have enough time for that. And so when they get out on the floor, it's so overwhelming to them that they don't know what to do, and they leave, they walk out, they go, they can't do it, they can't handle it. And it's an emotional toll. We people that leave right after the first time they have a patient pass away, because they wasn't prepared for that. It's like, especially the CNAs that are trained inside the nursing homes, it's like they get the bare minimum of what they need to get them on the floor and get them out there so they can say they have staff on the floor. And it's not fair to the residents. It's not fair to the CNAs that are out there having to provide that kind of care. And also,
Thank you.
there's the CNA to patient ratio. When I left my facility where I worked for 27 years, my ratio was up to 20 to 25 patients. And probably 90% of them were total cares. And
What does that mean? Explain what that means. Yeah.
care is like you have to completely bathe them, change them, feed them, get them up with a lift. Every time they need to go to the bathroom, every time, they get up and have to be moved from bed to chair, from bed to shower chair, from shower chair back to wherever. And it takes two people to do that. And, so it's just very overwhelming to have that many patients. And for me, I, in good conscience, got to where I could not go home and know that I had truly taken care of my patients like they needed to be taken care of.
Thank you, Sharon. I would like so given Susie's in the documentary, for those of you who haven't seen it, or those who have, you may recall that Susie's mother was it happened between 2021 and 2022. So COVID was not quite over. There were still lots of restrictions in place. There were still protocols. There was still masking. And I recall at one point, Susie, your mother you wanted to have your mother go outside. And I think you had to wait, so for some reason they didn't want you to take your mother outside, but you had to wait and wait and wait on that. And then there was another, at the same time, I think your mother was placed in a room because she had come back from the hospital. She had to be quarantined in a room that was not her original room, and it was not air conditioned, and she had to wait there for how long? It was a couple weeks, right? It was several weeks, and it was not even air conditioned, and it was really hot outside. It was like June or so, or anyway, it was in LA,
It
and
was Los Angeles and it was a heat wave. Yeah.
yes. And I wonder, Sherry, given this, what you know, what you experience, are you surprised that Susie's mother went through this, what she went through? I mean, there's so much more to what she went through as well, but just that little.
No, especially during COVID. That's the thing. The families were banned. She was just lucky that she got a visit because, for a year or longer, they wasn't even allowed to come in, and we would, so you didn't see what was going on. You didn't see if your family was getting up, if they were being turned, if they were eating and getting the proper nutrition and what was developing under the covers. To just put it mildly, you didn't know if they were developing sores and stuff like that. And yeah, visiting through windows and visiting through doors. And
I didn't see my mom for a year and a half.
Good
yeah,
So,
Lord.
yeah.
yeah,
I didn't realize, I forgot about that part. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not surprised at that point, because I feel like at that time, the facilities were, out of mind, out of sight, so we don't have to deal with these issues. And COVID, really brought to light the issues of short staffing. However, it also made it worse because at first we didn't have the proper PPE. So it was like everybody was passing it around and we couldn't protect ourselves or our residents. And so not only was we already short staffed, but then half our staff was out with COVID. And instead of nurses who are sitting at their desk, doing paperwork to get the money for the care that's a lot of times not being actually given, to me, that's when they needed to come out to the floor, and there needed to be, all hands on deck. But it didn't happen that way.
So, Susie, when in 2021, I believe that was when you were able to go back and you did visit your mother as often as you visited her quite often, correct? And that's where the documentary picks up. Am I correct?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
And
Well, it picked up when they allowed us outdoor visits.
okay,
That was when it picked up, and that's when you see me talking to my mom, and that becomes like the thread. And
okay.
I hadn't seen her in person for a very long time, and so yeah, that's when I found someone else's teeth in her mouth, and I didn't know she had the bed sore at that point because we were only allowed to have you know very limited visits, and that was because they were supposed to be someone there watching because you had to be checked for your vaccination records and all these things. You had to wear a mask. It was hell. It was hell during that time. It was so emotionally draining and trying to you know dog paddle in an ocean that you don't know what you're doing. Like you have no idea. Like no one's telling you the truth. Nobody, and you know it, but there's nothing you can do about it. I just put some stats in the chat if you guys want to look at it. Like, can I just say it real fast because I think it's just boggles the mind. Is over 200,000 residents and frontline providers died during COVID. That's an astounding number, and before their time. And most of the residents did not die from COVID. They died from isolation and failure to thrive, which is a result of isolation. And it should outrage the public, but the public, for the most part, doesn't know that stat. And that's how many that's 6 times as many of 9/11. I mean, it's just such a huge amount of life loss for no reason.
And I think what's so tragic is, well, among the many tragedies, is that this so what the story of what happened to your mother took place again at the tail end of the epidemic after nursing homes were open to visitors, and once that happened, then she again, even despite being open and despite seemingly that the epidemic and the viruses were minimized and that the impact was minimized, she still at every turn was the systems failed her at nearly every turn. Hospice, and then was it 6 hospitalizations that she
Yes,
endured? It was
yes.
so it's unbelievable that unfortunately this continues to happen. I think even today, as we gather many anecdotal accounts and including what you expressed just that you received last night, what you continue to receive, unfortunately, are stories like that.
I have people, there's a gentleman that reached out to me through the Writers Guild who said, why isn't this why isn't this story being told like all the time? My mom is going through this right now, and he wanted to Zoom with me. This is just another anecdote, but we had a Zoom scheduled, and then he texted me at like 2 in the morning saying, I'm at the hospital. I had to force the nursing home to send my mom there. I knew there was something wrong, and she had a stage 4 pressure sore, and she was going into surgery. And I said, I'm here, just call me. I'm anything you need. But so, yeah, so here we are 4 years later and nothing has changed. My heart, I felt like I was in that waiting room with him. I knew exactly what he was going through.
Thank you for that, Susie. And I want to turn to Lori now. So, Lori, given your vast experience in this field, why do you think long-term care, why do you think this continues to happen?
Oh, Meg. Um, 30 minutes is the longest I've ever been quiet in my life from 2 to 2:30 today.
Oh, you're itching. I know you're
Well, East time, yeah. I'm in Central Time. I'm here in Missouri. Let me just say this. First, thank you for having me, and I'm enjoying the comments, although some of them are just heart-wrenching. The reason this continues, I started in 1980 as a high school dropout in Anderson, Missouri, at a skilled nursing home as a dietary aide. And what I have seen over these 40 plus years, they want to use something like Susie and her mother's story as a one-off, an exception to the rule. And those of you or those of us that have been in this, in the trenches, like Sherry and I, we know this is not new. This is not an exception to the rule. It is the rule. And why is it the rule? I'll list a couple of things. Number one, Sherry talks about pay. We are all talking about how little the front line is paid. But let's look at it this way. The residents are not valued. Nursing homes, and I got to be careful with this because I want to be clear, because Susie shows where the money goes, right? It's not in the pockets of the guy or gal who's sitting in the administrator desk, and it's not the people that work there. She showed clearly, and I've been witness to it as I became a nursing home administrator and ran 10 skilled nursing centers myself during my career. She's not lying, and it's not an exception. It is the rule. When the average $300 a day payment to a nursing home for one of the sickest people in America, number one, is underfunded. The only way these owners make profit is by cheating the Medicaid system and buying the least expensive of everything they possibly can for these elders so that they can funnel off as much of that $300 a day as they possibly can. And our government enables that. As a matter of fact, that's what they designed it to. Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa has drugged family members in who have one horror story like Susie's after another of how American citizens have died the most unspeakly deaths, and the treatment, neglect, and abuse has been allowed to go on. Senator Grassley has had people come in there and testify to the Senate Aging Committee like they were really going to crack down and do something. And since 1980, I've not seen one positive change on behalf of the elders. And here's what I want to add to this. When the elder isn't valued, the caregiver isn't valued. When the caregiver isn't valued, the elder isn't valued. They are one and the same. You cannot separate them. They're like DNA. They go together. And I have never said that CNAs are the most important employee in the nursing home, but I've certainly said they're the most important to the resident. And I've never heard an elderly resident tell me I'm wrong in any forum I've ever sat on. So we keep sending Grassley, what is he, 100 now? He's still going to Congress. I think maybe he's not going to go back again. But we have reelected these people over and over and over again who've done nothing to protect our elders in this country. And the only way it's going to be fixed is to educate the consumers on why it happens, and how to protect their loved one when they're putting them in the most, I mean, exploitation is ripe for the picking on every elder in the United States of America. And so when government has no incentive to change and business is making fortunes, there's no incentive for a nursing home owner to invest in its people, not the residents or the staff. If they can be a 5-star government facility, 5-star, the highest ranking you can be of a nursing home, and have a 2-star staff, even our government is saying staffing doesn't matter when it comes to quality.
Mhm.
That's my story, and I'll stick to it for a while.
Thank you, Lori. I'd like to point out that Susie's mother was in what you described as a 5-star nursing home, correct?
Right.
And I believe what you meant by that was that it was rated 5 stars by the government program that rates nursing homes based on a set of quality measures, correct? And despite that, it seemingly failed her many times over in addition to the collection of other things that failed your mother and you in the process, unfortunately. I'd like to ask Susie, if you could talk a little bit about what you are doing with Roar. What are some of the solutions that you are working on? And we're going to hear from the other two as well about solutions that are out there to help resolve and address these issues.
Well, thank you again. So I think making this documentary, the question between all of the team was like, what do we do? We were exposing all this information. What can people do? What's the call to action? And, no, just jumping off of what Lori's talking about in the business model, when you say it's a broken system, it's broken for the consumer, but it's working perfectly for the investors and for the corporate entities that are behind it. And it works beautifully, and it has worked beautifully. And there's a very powerful lobby that is in place, and that lobby walks in, and again, I'm going to quote Rick if he's on here. He's laughing because he's going to say, unless you come in with a bag of money, no one's listening to you. And that's just the truth. So we've got lobbyists that have seats in the legislature. So even if you work so hard, like, I see in the chat, I am a supporter of the Essential Caregiver Act, which allows one essential caregiver to be present during an emergency, which none of us were. And it doesn't cost any more money, all the things why it should be in place. And yet their first, round, it was killed. And now they're doing a second round. And I hope to God that it gets passed. But even then, and I don't mean to be, negative, but the point is that who's enforcing it? This is the problem, because if you've got lobbyists in seats that make decisions, that's just it. That's a contradiction. And it's not, this is why things remain the way they are, because status quo serves them, not us. So with that said, we said we got to give some direction. And this is my first foray into this kind of advocacy, but we just launched a 501c3 grassroots movement called ROAR. It's Respect, Oversight, Advocacy, and Reform for Long-Term Care. And because story is so powerful, that's one of our main components, is using story like you, Meg. It's like that we know that art and story impact. They create empathy. Data doesn't. There's been plenty of reports on this broken system, but nobody knows about it outside of our bubble. Nobody. You tell them and they're in shock. They think you're crazy is what they do. They think you're crazy because the rhetoric is so tight, and it's been that way for so long. So our hope was through this movement that we educate the public through story, through the documentary, through other stories, reaching out to younger generations and informing them as to what their future can be, because this is everybody's story, and the mess that these generations will inherit, and make it the responsibility of the public and to shift how we think. Just like ageism and ableism are so responsible for this issue, and we've compartmentalized our elder population and our disabled population to little boxes of invaluables, people that are not valuable, who don't contribute. It's so far from the truth. It's so far from the truth. Like, I miss every single one of the people in my mom's facility that I would go to. They were my family, my mom's family. They were wonderful people, and very worthwhile. And this is the problem. So we think that educating and getting the story out there, being vocal and galvanizing and engaging with the public, so that they really finally realize that they need to take responsibility and demand, because the only currency we have is our constituency. That is our strong, and it's strong. I mean, no other changes have ever been made other than by grassroots movements. And that's the truth. I mean, you only have to look whether you like her or not, but Jane Fonda, who endorsed our documentary, is 88 years old, and she's as fierce as ever. She's leading 2 packs right now, and she's not going to stop till the day she doesn't take her last, till she takes her last breath. She's amazing, and she's so worthwhile, and she has such a force, and she has created a force for democracy and for the climate pact, and she's supported us because she knows how important it is. And that's what it's going to take is people. That's, all these wonderful, programs like, the greenhouse and Eden Project, all these wonderful Einstein, they're all great, but they're not going to survive in this climate. They're just not. And we want them to, of course we do, but they're not going to. Let's be honest, it's over 50 years that the same business model has been in place. And so it will take all of us nationally to say, we're done. We know what you're doing, and we're not voting for you. We need to change. We need this change now. And the people have to be the oversight and the enforcement. That's the way we feel. And I'm going to say it's possible because harder things have been done. And so I really believe that if we can educate people and let them know that this is their future they're looking at, because we can la 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 all day long, but we're all on the same road. So it's an equal opportunity, and God willing, we get old, everyone lives a nice old, age, but you want it to with quality. You don't want to be tortured.
Sherry, what would you say is what I know that you left the nursing home that you had worked at for so long after COVID, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, out of frustration. What would it take, do you think, for nursing homes to be able to keep CNAs, because it's so vital now for CNAs to the work of CNAs? What do you think it will take?
A whole revamp. I mean, the system needs to be tore completely down and rebuilt over again. It is so messed up. It's unfixable to me at this point. It's not worked for 40 or 50 years, and yet we continue. You can't change anything if you keep doing the same old, same old, same old. And the population of older people coming into nursing home right now is only getting more and more and more as the baby boomers are coming in, and we're going to need more and more caregivers. The solution is not half training them and bringing them in and putting them on the floor because people are getting hurt. The patients are getting hurt because they're not properly trained. The staff is getting hurt because they're not properly trained. They don't have the proper equipment. They don't have the proper things that they need to take care of these patients. And, you have to, instead of a workforce, we need a care force. We say that all the time. We've got to train people that this is an assembly line. We're not here to put somebody on a conveyor belt, wash them, and send them down the line. And that's all we do. They've made CNAs be so task oriented that all they know is to do this, this, and this. And then if you see them sitting and talking to a patient, well, they're lazy. They're not working. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're hiding. They're this, they're that. So actually taking time with the patient and being able to talk to them and be there for them emotionally, not just physically doing the physical stuff that they need, but also the emotional things that they need. We're not allowed to do that. And like I said, the system is just totally broken, and it's going to take a whole revamp.
Thank you. Lori, I think you probably want to add to that.
Well, it really does. We need to start from a blank sheet of paper, but Art, let's talk about ageism again for just a moment and how it really does impact this. Because if you think about it, ageism is nearly as hard on the youth as it is on the elders, because it's designed to keep us a bridge between us. It's not designed to bring us together. There's more for people to make off of us if if the elders are sitting at home going, what are these kids today? These kids today don't want to work. These kids today want to work their asses off. They just don't want to do it the same way we did. And that's what we're not willing to embrace as elders. So we as elders have just as much responsibility to reach out and try to learn and understand these folks rather than simply criticize them. And where you see this happening the best is in long-term care, where you have young nursing assistants and elders living. And the education I got, Meg, you mentioned I wrote a book, Everything I Learned in Life, I Learned in Long-Term Care, and it is a fact. I learned respect. I learned how to love older people, and they learned how to love me as a younger person. And until we embrace this on both sides, and I won't take but just a second, but I wanted to share an example in the workplace, Meg, that happened to me. I'm 63 years old right now, and when I became an administrator, I was 26 years old. My director of nurses that worked there when I took the position was nearly 60. She was in her later 50s. I was a young kid coming in there wanting to have the best nursing home that was ever developed in the United States of America that ever ran. And she had already been there, done that, was tired. I'm just a youthful person on my honeymoon. She tried to break me. And I decided, why do I have to break her? My boss gave me a laundry list, a legal pad this long, of what to go over with her when I fired her, because it was an impossible situation. And I went home, 26 years old, scared to death to go over this list and wondered why I had to demolish this woman when the only issue was that we couldn't be simpatico in the leadership because I wanted to change and she didn't. And so I threw that list away. I walked in her office that next morning and I said, Virginia, with all due respect, your way and my way, they're just not the same way. And I'd like to ask you to make today your last day. She thanked me and walked out of there with her head held high. We have to start looking for ways to come together. And again, we are the constituents. I'm going to encourage all of the elders that are on this to go out and meet a youth. Ask them some questions. What's important to you today? What's changed? I'm old. I don't want to feel old because I want to learn new ways. They will tell you and they will love you for asking. But this used to be a country that was built on respecting elders, and that went away some 3 decades ago. And we have to once again teach, train, and start with a blank slate and create the model, not just a pilot model, but a model that will be sustainable throughout time, or certainly throughout the next 3 to 5 decades of caring for our elders by lifting them up as the most important people in our society, not the least important.
Lori, can you talk a little bit about CareForce Academy?
I sure can. CareForce Academy was developed because, I've been at the head of NACA for 31 years, and we have tried. The states make it so impossible to offer the CNA certification that we can't really scale to the number. There's about 300 to 400,000 openings for CNAs in the marketplace right now, and that doesn't even take into consideration the family caregivers, the unpaid caregivers that are caring for their elderly loved ones and disabled at home. So the CareForce Academy was created to start. It will offer what is called a direct care professional course. There'll be a certification model for family caregivers who want to keep their loved ones at home, and one that has not been present in our history. One that helps you be successful at caregiving, not just telling you, here's what to do. And then the CareForce Academy has the ability to scale hundreds of thousands of newly hired or newly recruited students to become part of this CareForce, a national movement of people on purpose becoming direct care professionals, knowing, I don't think I mentioned in the first, when I first spoke, I'm a high school dropout. And I want to ask you, where else in this country could a 17-year-old high school dropout go and have the most amazing career that I have had? I do not have a bachelor's degree. I care about old people and I learned how to speak about their issues and to look at ways to protect them. And so I love this field. And I want to encourage and build a brand new workforce. So Meg and many of the others, Sherry Perry, my board chair, we came together and built the CareForce Academy, soon to launch as a national model. There are no regulations around who can take this course and who can become a direct care professional. We should be able to do at least a couple 100,000 new caregivers every year. And so I hope you all stay tuned and stay abreast of CareForce Academy. And I think there's some information that Meg or someone has put in the chat on how to do that. My email's in there as well. There's a lot of work to be done, and we could have these webinars. I see Meg trying to jump in on me. We could have these webinars once a week and never run out of topic.
Yeah,
But this is something that I'm so thankful Art Against Ageism has taken on this webinar. Meg, thank you, and to all that registered here.
I did put a link to CareFirst Academy in the chat, and I would like we have about 8 minutes left. We would love to take some questions. I think I'm looking to see if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. You can probably wave it in front of the camera, and then the raise hand thing will go up. I think it does that. AI does that now. But oh, and you put the Roar organization in the chat. I see, Susie. Thank you. Somebody did add, there's somebody, got to be somebody who has a question and wants to ask a question. What happened to the art piece of the agenda? So we talked about the very beginning, the art piece is and we did talk about it throughout. I will say the documentary, No Country for Old People, is a form of art. Documentary is an art form. And actually, I mean, that's a good question because I think I don't know if I asked you this, Susie. What creative processes did you employ in creating the documentary? Did you think about? So obviously you used film, right? Because you had that, but you also used stats. You used art. I mean, it was artful and many we used many graphics, sort of that sort of thing. So I'm curious to know what your process was. That'll probably help answer her question.
Well, our process was a combination of investigative storytelling. So, and then of course, moving very personal narratives, not just mine, but other families, because I wanted the audiences to connect emotionally first. And that's the beauty of story. And so we anchored the series in real family experiences and layered it with experts and then the frontline workers and who also had their personal experiences, you know. And if you watch, you'll see other, you know, people very emotional, frontline workers, very emotional, and also then the legal perspectives. And then we used cinema verite, which is very, you know, powerful. And that
Could
which
you
I
explain what cinema verite means?
well, basically, you know, taking your camera in and just shooting raw and shooting what's happening as it unfolds. And, you know, I'm from to put the camera on myself while I was being emotional was really difficult for me because it felt exploitive, it felt disingenuous, and I had to wrap my head around this sort of selfie new world that we're in and thought, well, is that a powerful message? And had to put my own feelings aside because that is cinema verite as well. So if you look at it that way, and to share those deep private emotions with the audience so that you can say this is real and that this is what I'm experiencing at the moment and I'm feeling, you know, helpless. I'm feeling like I'm being victimized. I'm feeling like I'm living on some planet that I don't recognize. And so I just thought I must do this. And it was really scary for me to do that. And I don't think that, you know, I didn't know I could do that, but because I feel it's very uncomfortable, obviously, right? And then we really, and I also turned the camera around when I could, because I was often told, put your camera away. I was told I wasn't allowed to film my mother anymore.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't, I think you mentioned it a couple times in the film, right? I think you do mention that you were told, but I didn't realize it was that often. So,
Oh, yeah. I wanted to take a picture of her wound because they wouldn't show me if it had where it was at, what stage, could I see it? And then I wanted to take a picture so I could send it to a specialist because they wouldn't bring a specialist in. They said, you're not allowed. We have to get permission. It's like, how am I not allowed? I'm her legal conservator of person, her medical voice. I don't understand this. So but they did, and there comes the retaliation portion of the story, which is like you have to mitigate the results, what's going to happen to you and what's going to happen to your mom when you're not there. So you kind of have to go with the flow. If they say get out of the room, which they did very, very unceremoniously and very, disrespectfully, like just get out, and would close the curtain on me. So I would just stand near the curtain just to hear to make sure mom wasn't in pain. And so, yeah, it's so emotional and just draining. It's so draining. So I know what caregivers go through. I really do. Um, and then I took as much history and archival material, information that I could to, to parallel it to what's happening today, and to say, so I really had evidence that this is not a one-off. This is not an angry daughter. I am angry, but it's not that this is just my whole, impetus is to to be vindicated. No, this was not about that. I wanted people to understand that I'm not, we did our work. And working with someone like Rick Montgessel, who has gone up against the biggest corporations and big pharma, and knows how to create and present a case. So what I'm trying to do is present a case in the most personal way, so that it does touch people and affect them, like you said, Lori, and just make like it has to change. And we can't give it a facelift. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work. We're just putting lipstick on what is it? Lipstick on a pig, whatever. It's just not going to work. It's performative. And it's actually does us a disservice when we think things are getting better. We don't look at them, right? It's like the greatest joke that the devil ever played. What is it that they made? He made you believe that he didn't exist. So that's the thing. When you think if there's no problem existing, we don't look at it. That's why we need to, amplify the message and let everyone know that it's still going on. It will go on until we take it into our hands to make it stop.
exactly. And I'm putting in the chat a podcast, Susie, that you are on this week. It's the Aging In podcast called Elevate Eldercare. If anybody wants to go much more in depth about Susie's story, it's really fascinating. I put a link to it there. And also, I'd like to thank Julie for her comment here, in which she says that No Country for Old People showed the art of the true human experience. The first thing that I saw was the genuine love between Susie and her mom, and I will echo that. I believe the same thing. It was incredible love. Clearly, it was very clearly demonstrated. Whatever you did worked for me because I thought it, and obviously many others, because it really did demonstrate and illustrate the love that you have for your mother. I could tell by the look in the eyes of Susie's mother. She was aware
Yeah,
Susie was to do her advocate and her voice. So,
I tried my hardest. I didn't prevail. I didn't win at the end, but I did win because I learned, right?
yes.
I learned. So yeah, I did the best I could, and like most caregivers do, we do the best we can, and that's, you know, that's all we can do in this framework. Well, we can do better. We will, and we will.
Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you're able to get the links and that you will look at it. I will be sending a recording out to the people who registered early next week. Again, thank you to the panelists. Your voices are incredibly important, and your stories are too. So, thank you again, and take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Meg.